Boston's November rain hammered the thin window like someone knocking to be let in. On the splintered studio floor, Maya Collins knelt between half-filled boxes, clutching a roll of tape she couldn't afford to waste and a future she couldn't seem to keep. On the door behind her, an eviction notice glared in red. 72 hours to vacate. Outside in the hallway, voices drifted through the thin walls, neighbors whispering, someone snickering. Dylan's smug laugh as he told another tenant, "Whatever she leaves, I'm dumping. Especially that coffin-looking dresser." Every insult she'd ever heard about that piece of furniture marched through her mind. Her mother calling it dead weight. Chloe rolling her eyes, saying, "You're the only person under 30 dragging a corpse of a dresser into every apartment." Her ex shrugging, "You wonder why life never changes, but you keep hauling trash around like an anchor." The dresser stood in the corner, heavy, chipped, carved roses, dulled by time. It didn't match the plastic bins or the thin mattress on the floor. It belonged to another life, to Elise Collins, the only adult who had ever made Maya feel like she wasn't a temporary problem. Her fingers closed around one of the brass handles. If she left it, she might pack faster, talk someone into helping with moving costs, sell a few things. If she kept it, she'd drag it down 3 flights alone. Again, for the first time, the thought slipped in like cold water. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe the old dresser wasn't loyalty. Maybe it was proof she didn't know when to let go. What Maya didn't see, what nobody mocking her could imagine, was that behind that tired wood and jammed drawers lay a hidden plan her grandmother had built in secret for years, one that quietly held more than $110 million, more than the entire building was worth. And in less than 3 days, desperation would finally push Maya to touch the one spot on that dresser that would change everything. Maya woke before her alarm most mornings, not because she felt rested, but because worry pulled her out of sleep before the first ring. Numbers woke with her. Rent, overdue notices, bus fares, grocery lists, all marching through her head in a thin, relentless line. Outside the window, the Boston sky stayed dark, a flat sheet of November cloud over crooked brick buildings. She swung her feet onto the cold floor and dressed in the half-light, saving both the bulb and the electricity. Her first shift started at a cramped neighborhood grocery on Tremont, a store that always smelled of bleach, cardboard, and fruit 1 day past fresh. By 6, she was behind the counter, scanner in hand, sliding barcodes past the red beam, while commuters rushed through, with shoulders hunched and coffee cups held like shields. They placed items on the belt without lifting their eyes, checked messages, while she rang totals, tapped cards, grabbed receipts, and hurried back into the gray morning. Her manager, Victor, liked that she never refused a schedule change and always covered shifts, but liking did not raise her wage by even a single cent. Every 2 weeks, a flimsy envelope appeared in her locker with her pay stub. After taxes and deductions, the number at the bottom barely deserved to be called a paycheck. More than half vanished the moment she paid rent on the tiny studio she currently called home. Electricity, transit, and a bare minimum of food ate most of what remained. She learned to stretch cheap pasta and frozen vegetables across days, to drink whatever coffee sat in the staff pot, to wear the same jeans until the fabric thinned at the knees. Heat stayed low through winter nights, She layered sweatshirts and socks instead of touching the thermostat. When Victor finally killed the grocery lights and pulled down the metal grate, her day still sat only halfway through. She rode a bus across town, pressed between tired workers and students, heading toward a concrete office building that looked identical to all the others on the block. Northline Services rented the 6th floor. Inside, fluorescent tubes hummed above rows of cubicles, casting everything in a restless pale glow. Her badge called her Agent Collins, as if a title could make the work feel less exhausting. At the call center, she slipped on her headset, logged into the system, and watched the queue counter climb. "Thank you for calling Northline Services. My name is Maya. How can I assist you today?" The line left her lips so often it stopped feeling like language and became a sound on command. Some callers yelled, some cried, some spoke softly about problems she could not truly fix. Timers tracked every second, while supervisors paced the aisles, urging agents to sound cheerful. By the end of each night, her throat burned and the muscles between her shoulders trembled with fatigue. Together, the two jobs kept her hovering just above disaster. One bus, pass lost. One sick day, 1 week of reduced hours, and the budget crumbled. This eviction notice, taped to her current door, was the third in 2 years. Landlords changed, but the pattern stayed the same. Rent climbed, fees multiplied, and eventually, someone decided her paycheck did not meet their standards. Then, the countdown started, and she packed her life into boxes again. Each move cost her something. A chipped lamp left beside a dumpster. A set of plates sacrificed when a box split. Curtains that never fit new windows. Yet one object always went with her, no matter how many stairs she climbed alone. The dresser, dark wood, carved with roses, worn smooth, brass handles, rubbed dull. It had once stood in her grandmother, Elise's bedroom. Now it stood wherever Maya landed. Movers groaned when they saw it, and a co-worker from the grocery muttered, "You know, you could buy lighter furniture, right?" While they strained to push it around a tight corner. Her family understood even less. Her younger sister Chloe, always polished for office photos and party posts, hated how the dresser ruined her idea of a clean, modern life. When she visited, she tapped its side and said, "You're trying to live like an adult, but you keep dragging this haunted thing from place to place." Sell it. Their mother, Marianne, cared most about what people at church and online thought of her daughters. On the phone, she urged Maya to copy Chloe's glossy path, told her that clinging to sad old objects made her look stuck and small, then changed the subject before asking how many hours her eldest was working. The people who had hurt her never once worried about the weight she carried. Her ex-husband had loved how hard she worked until the moment responsibility landed on him. At first, he had brought flowers to her grocery shifts, joked about free snacks, promised that once his ideas took off, she would not have to juggle jobs. Instead, he drained what little savings she had, skipped job applications, and disappeared for nights with vague stories and the smell of alcohol clinging to his clothes. The final breaking point came after the miscarriage, when she lay in a hospital bed and he complained about parking fees instead of holding her hand. By the time he left for good, he had taken her trust with him, and the grief settled into her bones like a permanent bruise. The one person who had ever really asked how she felt was gone 3 years earlier, before the hospital room and the funeral and the quiet house. There had been a late afternoon in Elise's bedroom. 16-year-old Maya had arrived there, shaking with anger after another fight at home, certain nobody would ever be proud of her. Elise had brewed tea, listened without interrupting, then led her down the short hallway to a blue-painted room where the dresser stood beneath a lace-curtained window. Sunlight turned the wood almost golden. "This old thing has seen more years than you and your mother combined," Elise had said, resting a gentle hand on the carved edge. "People have tried to talk me into replacing it for decades. They think new always means better. It does not. Sometimes the strongest things learn how to stay." She had opened the top drawer, reached inside, and taken out a small brass key, strung on a thin ribbon. Placing it in Maya's palm, she added, "Wherever you go, take this piece of furniture with you, if you can. One day, when life feels like it is trapping you in a corner, I want you to remember that not everything heavy is a burden. Some things are proof that you are not as alone as you think." Back then, Elise's words had sounded like the gentle comfort adults offered when they had no practical advice left. Still, when she died and distant relatives circled the small house, everyone reached for rings, dishes, and anything that sparkled under the ceiling light. Nobody wanted the heavy dresser in the bedroom corner. They called it impractical and outdated while they compared jewelry. Maya signed the forms, hired the cheapest truck she could find, and made sure the wooden giant left with her, even if it meant one less piece of furniture somewhere else. Since then, it had followed her from address to address, from one thin mattress to the next, holding folded clothes and the last traces of her grandmother's perfume in its wooden grain. It wobbled slightly on one leg, one drawer stuck in damp weather, and the finish had long since lost its shine. Yet, it remained the only thing in each apartment that felt like it had chosen to stay. On nights, when exhaustion pinned her to the bed, she would lie in the dim light and watch shadows crawl across the dresser's surface, pretending Elise sat nearby with warm tea and better advice than anyone else could offer. The outside world saw an outdated piece of furniture, too heavy for small rooms and too plain for stylish lives. For Maya, it was the one constant in a world that kept shifting on her feet. If you have ever kept something everyone else dismissed, a faded photo, a worn jacket, a chipped mug, because letting go felt like tearing away your last safe corner, you already understand her better than her own family. Maybe you are hearing this on your way to work or lying awake doing quiet math in the dark. Stay with her story. And if her struggle feels close to yours, you can return, follow along, and share this journey. Because sometimes the thing the world calls junk is exactly what opens the door out. The last 48 hours before eviction passed in a blur that felt half dream, half nightmare. The boxes leaned against one another like weary soldiers, her mattress already stripped, curtains folded, dishes wrapped in old grocery receipts. Every corner of the apartment smelled faintly of dust and rain. Maya's body moved on instinct, sorting, taping, stacking, while her mind spun through the same hopeless arithmetic. How much money remained, what day the next paycheck would drop, which item she could pawn without collapsing entirely. Outside, the hallway echoed with Dylan's heavy boots and the shrill ring of his keys. The landlord's son never knocked softly. He enjoyed the noise, the power of it. When she opened the door, he stood there with a clipboard in one hand and a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Clock's ticking, Collins," he said, voice stretched with false sympathy. 70. 2 hours means 70. 2. Unless, of course, you finally decide to get rid of that antique eyesore and pay what you owe. She stayed silent. Dylan looked past her into the apartment until his gaze landed on the dresser. He tapped the clipboard with a finger. "Sell that thing. It's the only item here that might fetch $50. Otherwise, I'll save you the trouble and have the movers toss it straight to the curb." When he left, laughter followed him down the stairwell, low, deliberate, like a knife dragged across metal. She locked the door and leaned against it, pulse hammering. The dresser sat in the middle of the room now, dark and immovable. Rain struck the window in sharp bursts, the wind carrying bits of city noise, horns, sirens, voices, all reminding her that life outside went on, indifferent to whether she stayed or vanished. She pressed her palm against the wood. $50, she whispered, almost laughing at the insult. Then, quieter, maybe he's right. For a long moment, she studied the thing she had protected through 3 apartments, 4 staircases, 5 miserable winters. The brass handles had dulled to the color of old coins. A corner of one drawer stuck out slightly, refusing to close. What if she finally let it go? She could post it online tonight, get a buyer by morning, pay half the rent, delay eviction by a week or 2. Maybe it was time to be practical instead of sentimental. But a thought made her chest ache. She could almost hear Elise's voice in the quiet, the faint southern lilt that had carried both warmth and warning. That voice pulled her back 16 years to a memory dusted with sunlight and the smell of furniture polish. She had been 16, sitting on the edge of her grandmother's bed, sulking after another fight with her mother. The afternoon light spilled through lace curtains, turning every dust mote into gold. Elise sat across from her, a thin woman with strong hands and soft eyes that missed nothing. The room was lined with books and photographs, and against one wall stood the dresser, taller then. Or maybe she had simply been shorter. Its surface gleamed under careful care, each carved rose catching the light. "You think I don't understand being angry," Elise had said, folding a clean handkerchief. "But anger's a tricky thing, baby. It burns everything except what it should." Maya had muttered something about running away, about how nobody listened. Elise had chuckled softly, then motioned her closer. She opened the top drawer, drew out a small brass key, and pressed it into Maya's palm. "Keep this. One day you'll have more rooms than you can fill and more silence than you can stand. When that happens, remember, love doesn't vanish just because people stop showing it right. Sometimes it hides where you least expect." She traced the carved roses on the dresser then, not understanding why the air felt heavy with meaning. Elise had tapped the wood. "This piece has been in our family since before the Depression. People tried to sell it when times were rough, but it stayed. It's built to last. You'll learn one day why." The memory faded as thunder rolled outside her current window. Maya blinked, and the room snapped back into its dim, cold reality. The dresser looked smaller now, dull under the weak bulb, yet the same old calm clung to it. She crouched beside it, running her fingers along the carvings, tracing where varnish had chipped away. Maybe there really was something stubborn inside her that refused to let go, an inheritance no one could measure. Her phone buzzed again, Another message from Dylan. Midnight tomorrow, Collins. After that, everything's mine to toss. She closed the screen without replying. The walls felt closer. Anxiety fluttered behind her ribs like trapped wings. She looked around. 5 boxes labeled in black marker clothes. Dishes, papers, bathroom, other. That was her entire life, distilled into cardboard and tape. The thought sent a flash of anger through her. How could one person's effort shrink into this? How could years of trying so hard produce nothing but death notices? And a landlord's son mocking her. She kicked the nearest box, then sank to the floor, breathing hard. Her eyes landed on the dresser again. Maybe it's time, she murmured. Maybe I can't keep choosing memories over survival. She fetched a damp cloth, began wiping the dust from its surface, as if cleaning might prepare her to part with it. The smell of old wood rose faintly, mingling with the scent of rain. As she wiped, she noticed the smallest, irregular line near the bottom panel. Something she had never seen before. A thin groove, barely visible, running along the lower edge. Her fingertip followed it out of habit, pressing slightly. The panel gave a faint creak, but held firm. She shook her head. Don't start imagining things now. The night deepened. She reheated leftover noodles, ate without tasting, then stood by the window, watching lights blur through rain. Down below, Dylan smoked near his truck, phone glowing in his hand. The sight filled her with the same mixture of fear and defiance that had fueled most of her life lately. When she turned back, the dresser seemed to fill the whole apartment. Every memory of Elise lived inside that silhouette. The smell of tea, the sound of soft laughter, the warmth of a hand on hers, tears pressed against her throat. She sat on the floor again, resting her head against the cool wood. I wish you were here, she whispered. A faint tick echoed from somewhere inside wood settling. Perhaps, but the sound startled her. She waited for it again, heartbeat in her ears. Nothing. The apartment returned to stillness. She laughed at herself. A short, brittle sound. I'm losing it, she said, talking to furniture like it's going to save me. Yet the memory of that afternoon when Elise gave her the key refused to leave. The brass key still hung from her keychain, worn, smooth, by years of touch. She reached for it, turning it over in her fingers. Elise had never told her what it opened. Maybe a jewelry box, maybe nothing at all. It had just been a symbol of trust, or love, or both. Now, in the silence of a nearly empty apartment, she felt the faintest urge to see if it belonged somewhere on the dresser. But exhaustion won. She set the key on the table, switched off the lamp, and lay on the mattress. The storm outside had softened to drizzle. She could still hear the slow drip of water from the gutter and the hum of traffic beyond. Sleep hovered near, but refused to take her. Thoughts circled instead. What if I sell it? What if there's nothing left to lose? What if Elise was wrong about keeping it? Somewhere between those thoughts and the rain, she decided she would make a choice in the morning. She would look at the numbers one last time, check if anyone online wanted to buy old furniture. If the answer stayed no, she'd call a mover, pay the penalty, and walk away. Maybe freedom was lighter than loyalty. Yet, as her eyes drifted shut, one image slipped through the noise. Her grandmother's calm smile and the faint tap of her finger on polished wood as she said, You learn why. The next day would bring more than deadlines. It would bring that lesson hidden deep inside the same dresser. Everyone mocked, waiting for the one desperate moment when she finally touched the right place. If you've ever stood at that same edge between letting go and holding on, stay with her a little longer. Because sometimes the world strips you down to your last possession just to show that inside it lies everything you were meant to find. Midnight had come and gone, but the apartment still looked like a half-finished battlefield. Boxes gaped open, packing tape hung in ragged strips, and the eviction notice on the door glowed pale whenever passing headlights slipped through the blinds. Maya's budget notes lay abandoned on the table, covered in angry arrows and crossed-out figures that never added up to enough. Her head buzzed with the same loop. Pay what you can, lose what you must. Start over somewhere smaller, cheaper, colder. Dylan's voice echoed over it all. Go ahead, leave the old coffin. I'll toss it for you. Her eyes drifted to the dresser. It stood in the middle of the room now, dragged away from the wall so she could squeeze boxes behind it. The overhead bulb painted its scratched surface in tired yellow light. Carved roses blurred into soft scars. Every dent, every nick, every dull brass handle carried some stubborn piece of her past. Tonight, it just looked heavy. Fine, she muttered, rubbing her hands over her face. Let's see what's really left in you. Sleep wasn't coming. Panic had burned through to a strange, sharp focus. She pushed the box aside with her foot and stepped in front of the dresser. The air close to it held that faint, familiar scent dust, old wood, the ghost of Grandma Elise's perfume. Maybe imagination, maybe not. She yanked open the top drawer and slid it all the way out. It scraped along the runners, then came free with a tired sigh. Inside lay rolled socks, folded t-shirts, a stray earring, a crumpled movie ticket. She carried the drawer to the bed, dumped everything gently into a box, and went back for the next one. The rhythm steadied her frayed nerves. Pull, lift, empty, sort, receipts into trash, old pay stubs into a folder, a photo strip of her and Chloe, laughing with mouths open, went into the keep pile almost without thinking. With every drawer she emptied, the room grew messier, but her thoughts grew clearer. At least here, when she moved something, the world in front of her actually changed. By the time she reached the second to last drawer, the dresser looked hollowed out, its insides exposed. Pale rectangles marked where clothes had shielded the wood from dust. Cobweb threads shimmered in the corners. Her arms ached, but it felt better than sitting at the table staring at impossible numbers. She bent to the bottom drawer, set her fingers around the worn brass handles, and pulled. It slid out an inch and stopped. Don't start, she muttered. She tugged harder. The drawer groaned, moved another inch, then jammed completely, like something inside had thrown itself against the wall. She crouched, squinting along the sides. The wooden runners were rough, scarred from years of use, but something about the base caught her eye. A thin, pale line ran across the inside panel, almost perfectly straight, not like a random scratch from keys or buttons, more like a seam. Maya rocked the drawer from side to side, trying to free it. Wood rasped against wood, the sound loud in the otherwise quiet room. On the third pull, something inside thumped a dull, solid knock, as if a heavy object had shifted. Her heart lurched. She let go and listened. Outside, a car splashed through a puddle. Somewhere in the building, a pipe clanged. Inside the dresser, silence settled again, calm and dense, almost deliberate. Pulse quickening, she braced her feet and gave the drawer one more hard yank. With a protesting scrape, it jerked forward and finally slid all the way out into her arms. It was noticeably heavier than the others had been, even when she saw only a few sweaters and an old hoodie inside. She carried it to the bed, dumped the clothes in a clumsy pile, and turned back to the empty drawer. Running her fingertips across the bottom, she felt it immediately, the subtle rise in the center, like a board laid over another board. The surface wasn't flat. A second layer rested on top of something else. Her fingers followed the faint groove running across the width where that extra panel ended. It vanished into the sides, clean and straight. Someone had done this on purpose. A shiver moved through her. No way. She flipped the drawer onto its side and inspected the underside. Tiny nail heads held the extra board in place, their metal darkened with age. There, again, the seam, the clear line between the real base and a second, thinner sheet of wood. "Grandma, what did you do?" she whispered, barely aware she'd spoken. She set the drawer aside and leaned into the now empty cavity in the dresser. Without the drawers, she could see all the way to the back. The interior looked shallower than the outside frame suggested, as if inches were simply missing. When she slid her hand along the floor of the compartment, her palm bumped over dust, splinters, and that same smooth groove at the back edge. Her throat went dry. She felt along each corner, fingers tracing every uneven bit of grain, every nail, every bump. On the right side, just above where the floor met the wall, her fingertip slipped into a narrow notch cut into the wood. It was small, almost invisible, and yet it fit her finger perfectly, as if someone had measured it. Her breathing slowed. For a moment, all the noise of her life, Dylan's smirk, her mother's criticism, the call center, the grocery store fell away. There was only the dresser, the groove, the notch, and the memory of Elise's voice. "You'll learn why." Maya pressed. At first, nothing moved. She pushed harder, shoulders tense. Then a sharp, clean click snapped through the quiet. She jerked her hand back. The dresser shivered under her touch, a tiny shift that ran through its frame. It felt exactly like a lock turning. Her hand shook as she reached in again. This time, when she pressed gently on the floor of the compartment, the board lifted a fraction of an inch. Her fingertips slid under the edge. She gripped the hidden lip and pulled. The false bottom rose slowly, dragging against the sides with a gritty scrape. Dust burst into the air, thick and dry, carrying the smell of old paper, cedar, and time trapped in wood. Beneath the lifted panel, a narrow compartment ran the full length of the dresser, its interior boards smoother and far less worn than anything above. Maya stared into the dark hollow. Two objects lay inside, resting snug against one another. The first was a rectangular leather case, dark brown and worn at the corners, its surface cross-hatched with fine cracks. A small clasp, dulled brass, held it shut. Beside it, fitting the remaining space perfectly, sat a flat metal box, gunmetal gray, edges rounded, lid flush, and seamless. For a few seconds, she didn't move. Her brain scrambled for reasonable explanations and came up empty. People like her didn't find secret compartments in old furniture. People like her found final notices and broken appliances. Yet the secret compartment was very real. So were the case and the box. She reached in and lifted the leather case out. It was heavier than she expected, dense and balanced, as if filled with more than paper. The metal box she left where it was, its weight still tucked in darkness. Waiting, kneeling on the worn floor, she set the case in front of her and ran her thumb over the clasp. Doubts crowded in. What if this was just old letters, expired documents, some forgotten mess that meant nothing? What if she'd opened a hidden space, only to find memories she wasn't ready to face? Then she saw her grandmother's hands in her mind, resting on this same wood, the quiet certainty in her eyes when she had told teenage Maya that the dresser was built to last. Built for what, exactly? Maya swallowed, pressed the clasp, and felt it snap open. The lid lifted on stiff hinges with a soft creak. Inside, instead of jewelry or keepsakes, lay neatly stacked folders held by elastic bands. Typed labels lined their tabs. Company names, dates, reference numbers. Beneath them, thick envelopes bore bank logos and embossed seals. At the bottom, partly hidden, a thinner bundle of papers waited, tied with twine, her own name written across it in Elise's careful script. Her vision narrowed. She picked up the top folder and opened it. Lines of print and numbers covered the page: share counts, valuations, totals. One figure near the bottom caught her eye. She read it once, miscounted the commas, read it again, tracing the digits with her finger. This time, her breath left her in a sharp, shaky sound. There, on a page that had been sleeping under her dresser for years, sat a number so large it didn't feel real, and the folder in her hand was only the first. The unopened metal box still waited in the hidden compartment. The bundle with her name still lay at the bottom of the case. She didn't yet know exactly what any of it meant. She only knew that the useless dresser everyone had mocked had just opened a door she never even knew existed. If you've ever believed that nothing truly big could be waiting for you, that your life is already written in small, tired lines, stay with Maya now, because what these papers are about to reveal will make that eviction notice look like a footnote. Maya stared at the figure until the numbers blurred. It wasn't a late fee, not a bill, not another demand for money she didn't have. It was the opposite. A neat summary of assets tied to an account with the last name Collins. Her last name. Her hands shook as she flipped to the next page. Company names she recognized from the news screens above: the grocery checkout technology firms, medical groups, energy companies. Each line carried its own cluster of numbers, rising and falling, always ending higher than anything her life had ever reached. Several pages in, she found a breakdown financial advisors would dissect for wealthy clients. The language felt foreign, but the meaning didn't. This was not one lucky account. It was something constructed carefully over time, piece by piece, behind the scenes of a life she thought she knew. She set the folder aside and opened the next. Photocopies of deeds slid into her lap. Small houses in towns she had never visited. Narrow lots on the edges of cities she knew only from weather reports. There were documents for an apartment building 3 states away, a pair of storefronts near a college campus, and a share of a warehouse by a busy highway. Stamps from county offices crowded the margins, each page declaring that these properties belonged to a trust managed in Elise's name. At the bottom of each deed, in fine print, sat a note, beneficiary designation, on file. Maya swallowed and stacked the deeds carefully, as if a clumsy touch might scatter the reality they described. The leather case felt heavier as she dug deeper. Thick envelopes appeared, stamped with bank logos. Statements summarized balances that made her eviction notice look like a misprint. On one page, near the top, a line read, "Net estimated value of combined assets, approximately $110 million, subject to market fluctuation." Her breath caught. 110 million. The number didn't fit. The woman who clipped coupons at the kitchen table, who reused wrapping paper, who rode the bus in storms rather than pay for a cab. It didn't fit the creaky house with mismatched plates. It didn't fit the story Maya had been handed about her family, the one where they were always barely getting by. At the bottom of the case, wrapped in twine, lay a bundle of papers with her name written across the front. For Maya, the first page said in Elise's small, steady handwriting. Her chest tightened. She untied the twine, smoothed the top sheet, and began to read. "My dearest girl," the letter started. The familiar script tugged at her so sharply that her eyes filled before she reached the second line. "If you are holding this, it means I am no longer there to explain everything with a pot of tea between us. Forgive me. Some doors must open after we've gone, not before." Elise wrote about the early years, long before Maya was born, when a broken appliance could swallow an entire month. She described how she started with almost nothing, extra coins from babysitting, sewing for neighbors, overnight shifts at diners. A passing comment about savings bonds had lodged in her mind. "I was tired of feeling one mishap away from losing the roof over our heads," she wrote. "So I began putting aside whatever I could. $5 here, 10 there. I traded little luxuries for a kind of safety no one could see." She wrote about learning the markets slowly, mispronouncing terms, asking questions, making careful choices. Over time, she shifted from saving to investing. Small stakes in companies she believed would last. Modest funds she let sit untouched. Income rolled back in again and again. Crashes came and went. She held her nerve, remembering what it felt like to fear the mailbox. "Your mother never shared that fear," Elise admitted without meanness. "Money burns holes in her pockets. Your aunt treats it as a spotlight. I love them both, but I learned enough to know they were not meant to be stewards of this particular garden." Property came later. The letter described a rundown house bought at auction, a vacant lot everyone else ignored, a cramped building whose owner needed out. None of it looked glamorous. "But land doesn't scroll away like numbers on a screen," she wrote. "It waits." Rents grew, neighborhoods shifted, and each unremarkable purchase added weight to the quiet pile she was building. "I stayed silent," the next paragraph said, "because speaking would have turned this into a battlefield. If your relatives had known, they would have clawed at it, and in the fighting, they would have destroyed the very thing they were reaching for. So I let them believe I had just enough." That lie protected the truth. Maya wiped her face with the back of her hand and kept going. "Why you?" the letter asked, as if Elise's voice had slipped into her doubt. "Because I watched you pay attention when no one else did. I saw you drag yourself to work after studying half the night. I saw you carry groceries without being asked, Sit with me when my hands hurt too much to sew. Listen when others only talked about themselves. You have known grief and refused to turn cruel. You have been poor without becoming small. That combination is rarer than any stock tip. The letter outlined the trust in calm, practical lines. Everything in the folders and deeds flowed into a structure created in Maya's name. The accounts, the properties, the instructions to lawyers to verify, guide, and shield. There was a waiting period with clear dates, limits on what could be withdrawn immediately, protections against opportunistic relatives and strangers. Elise had thought about taxes, market swings, and what might happen if shock blurred Maya's judgment. You will see that number, around 110 million, and it will frighten you, Elise wrote. Do not let it tell you who you are. You were valuable before this money ever existed. This does not erase what hurt you. It simply gives you tools you did not have. Use them like you use your time and kindness. Carefully, deliberately, never to make yourself feel bigger by making others feel small. Maya read those lines again until they settled in her chest like a new heartbeat. The apartment blurred around her. Bare walls, half-packed boxes, the open mouth of the hidden compartment. For the first time, the eviction notice felt paper-thin compared to the planning unfolding beneath her dresser for years. At the end of the letter, Elise's tone softened. I could not stop the world from laughing at you, from calling your dresser junk, from telling you to let go of what anchored you. What I could do was leave proof that I saw you clearly. When everyone else treated this piece of furniture as dead weight, you treated it as home. You chose loyalty over convenience, love over appearances. That is why this is yours. Maya pressed the page to her chest, shoulders shaking with relief tangled with anger and gratitude. Every insult from Dylan, every dig from her mother, every smirk from Chloe crashed against the fact that someone had spent decades betting on her in secret. She looked down at the open case, at the folders and envelopes, and the metal box still waiting in the hidden compartment. None of this erased the nights she had gone to bed hungry, or the humiliation of begging for extensions she never received. But suddenly, those nights weren't the whole story. They were the opening chapters of something her grandmother had trusted her to continue. If you've ever wondered whether anyone truly noticed your quiet effort, your small acts of decency when nobody was watching, stand here with her for a moment. Imagine discovering that someone had been quietly building proof that you were worth believing in. And if that thought stirs anything in you, stay close and share her journey. Because what Maya chooses to do with this inheritance will matter just as much as the fortune written on those pages for you. The phone number sat near the bottom of Elise's letter, written in the same steady hand as every other line. Maya stared at it until the digits began to swim, then forced herself to unlock her screen and type. Doubt hissed that any attorney would laugh, tell her she had misread everything, send her back to the eviction notice and the almost empty account. She hit call anyway. The line rang twice. Office of Daniel Green, a calm male voice said. Hi, she answered, throat tight. My name is Maya Collins. I found your number in my grandmother's papers. Elise Collins. Silence followed, like someone sorting through a mental file. Yes, he said at last. Miss Collins, I knew this day would arrive eventually. Are you somewhere private, She glanced at the half-packed boxes and the papers spread across the floor. Yes, I am. Good. Bring everything you discovered in that compartment, he said. Tomorrow, at 2 o'clock. Do not leave any document behind. When the call ended, the room felt different, as if a door had opened but not yet swung wide. She slept in pieces, waking to check the leather case again. By morning, grey light washed the walls. The eviction notice still hung on the door, but its red letters no longer looked like the final word. She dressed in the neatest clothes she owned and wrapped case and metal box in a sweater inside her backpack. Before leaving, she rested her hand on the dresser's surface. If this is all a mistake, I'm still keeping you, she murmured, then locked the door behind her. Downtown, the law office occupied part of a glass-fronted building. The brass plaque outside the suite read, Green and Lowell, Estate Law. Inside, carpet and quiet replaced street noise. A receptionist greeted her by name. The office door opened. A man in his late 50s stepped out, suit crisp, dark hair streaked with silver. Miss Collins? He said. She stood. Yes, I'm Daniel Green. His handshake was firm. Please, come in. Shelves held thick books and labeled binders. On one wall, a framed photograph showed Elise standing next to him, handshake frozen mid-clasp. Seeing her there knocked the breath from Maya's lungs. She insisted that picture stay where you would see it first, Mr. Green said quietly. He gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. You brought the materials? She set the backpack on her knees and handed over the leather case and the box. He opened the case, flipping through folders with practice motions. His eyes moved quickly, picking out dates, signatures, account numbers. Several times he nodded, as though matching each page to something he already knew. He unlocked the metal box with a key from his drawer and checked the certificates inside, then closed it again with care. Only when he had finished did he sit back. All right, he said. I can give you a clear answer. These documents are genuine. The trust exists. The assets are real and currently under management, according to your grandmother's instructions. Maya gripped the chair. So the number in the summary, the one with all the zeros, that wasn't a typo? No, he replied. As of the last consolidated report, the net value was estimated at roughly $110 million. Markets fluctuate, but the scale is accurate. She stared at him, trying to fit that reality on top of the one where she rationed bus fare and skipped meals. And it's mine? You are the sole beneficiary named in the trust, he said. Your grandmother was explicit. There are no competing claims, no clauses transferring it to other relatives later. This structure was built for you. Tears pricked behind her eyes. I'm about to be thrown out of my apartment, she said. I work 2 jobs. I have collection notices shoved in a drawer. Why didn't she tell me sooner? Because she wanted you safe, he answered. Sudden wealth can destroy lives when it arrives at the wrong moment or in the wrong hands. She trusted your character, but she did not trust the people around you. He turned the file toward her. The trust becomes fully accessible on your 30th birthday. Until then, distributions follow a schedule, and major changes require my sign-off as trustee. There is also an emergency provision. She anticipated that you might be in serious difficulty. Before that date, he pointed to a highlighted paragraph. In the event that Maya Collins faces housing insecurity, medical crisis, or other essential hardship, The trustee is authorized to release sufficient funds to stabilize her circumstances without harming the estate. Maya read the line 3 times, fingers tracing her own name. So, right now, with the eviction notice, qualifies, he said. If you wish, we can authorize an immediate transfer today. It will cover your rent arrears, utility balances, basic expenses for the next few months, and a small cushion so that one broken appliance does not send you spiraling again. This isn't a loan? She asked. I won't sign something and wake up owing it all back with interest. This is not debt, he said. This is your inheritance, distributed in stages. My job is to help you use it in ways that serve you rather than drown you. He slid a short form across the desk. If you consent, sign here. We'll need your current account information and your landlord's details. Her hand shook as she picked up the pen. For years, she had been signing the backs of checks that vanished within hours. This signature felt different, like placing a marker on a map she had not known existed. She wrote her name slowly, pressing the letters into the paper. Mr. Green added his own signature and tucked the form into the file. You will receive confirmation by email, he said. Most transfers clear within a day. On the way back down to the street, the building's glass walls reflected a version of her that looked almost unchanged. Same coat, same worn shoes, same backpack, yet something under her ribs had shifted. The balance in her account leaped from almost nothing to a number that made her blink. Another message documented payments scheduled to the property company and utility providers. She walked to the leasing office the next morning, expecting a fight. Instead, the manager checked the computer, then looked up with a brisk smile. We've received certified funds on your account, the woman said. Your ledger is clear. That notice on your door is void. Outside, cold wind stung her cheeks. She laughed once, then climbed the stairs to her apartment. Inside, nothing had moved. Boxes waited. The dresser stood against the wall, its surface catching a thin band of winter light. She crossed the room, placed both hands on the worn wood, and let herself breathe. The crisis had not vanished. Her life would not transform overnight, but for the first time in years, survival was not the only thing on the horizon, and the weight sitting quietly inside that dresser felt less like an anchor and more like a promise her grandmother had kept in secret. The letters from Mr. Green's office went out quietly. One to Marianne Collins, another to Chloe. Maya had agreed to send them, but could not bring herself to call first. It was easier to let envelopes carry the news that Elise's estate existed, that the trust was real, and that it named only one heir. No explanation of late fees or evictions, just legal lines and a number that rewrote what family money meant. The first call came the next afternoon while she sat on a milk crate behind the grocery store, coat zipped to her neck, breath fogging in the cold air. Her mother's name flashed on the screen until she finally answered. Maya, her mother said, skipping any greeting. What is this nonsense I received from some lawyer? Hi, Mom, she replied. I'm guessing you mean the letter about Grandma's trust. Marianne's voice sharpened. It says everything went to you. Everything. Properties, accounts, some ridiculous total. That cannot be correct. Your grandmother would never cut her own daughter out like that. It is correct, Maya said. I met with Mr. Green. He showed me the structure. She set it up years ago. A clatter sounded on the other end, as if a drawer had slammed. Years? And you hid it from us? Do you have any idea how that makes us look? People will think we were cruel to you. I didn't know either, Maya said. I only found the compartment last week. I had an eviction notice taped to my door when I called him. Her mother ignored that. You are not equipped to manage this. You can barely manage your own life. Chloe has a stable job. I have experience running a household. The sensible thing is to divide it fairly. You keep a portion, but the rest should support the family. Grandma already decided what was fair, Maya answered. She left clear instructions. The trust is in my name alone. There's no clause that changes that later. So you're just going to hoard it? Marianne demanded. Sit in that tiny place while your own mother worries about bills. After everything I've done for you? Old reflexes rose, urging her to apologize, offer compromise, prove she was not selfish. She let the urge pass. I'm sorry this hurts. You, she said, voice steady. But I won't undo what she put in place. I didn't choose the terms. I can only choose how I handle them. You've always been ungrateful. Her mother snapped, and the line went dead. The second call came that evening. As she walked home from the call center, city lights smeared across wet pavement. Chloe's name glowed on the screen. You seriously let a lawyer tell me about this? Her sister said without preamble. Do you know how humiliating that is? I barely understand it myself, Maya replied. I needed time to make sure it was real. Chloe's laugh was thin and sharp. Real? I came home to a document saying my big sister just became some secret millionaire while I'm grinding every day. Do you have any idea how insane that sounds? None of this changes what you've built, Maya said. Your job, your apartment, your plans, they're still yours. That's not the point, Chloe shot back. This isn't just your story. Grandma's estate should be family money. Do you really think she wanted you swimming in cash while your own mother and sister scraped by? If you actually cared, you'd share it. Maya stopped at a corner, watching the crosswalk light blink. I care, she said. I always have. But caring doesn't mean handing over control to fix everyone's feelings. Grandma chose me to manage this. The lawyer was very clear. So you're choosing money over us, Chloe said, each word clipped. I'm choosing the boundaries she built, Maya replied. I won't argue with you about that. Her sister tried another angle. Mom's not strong enough for this kind of stress. If anything happens to her because of you, that's on your conscience. The guilt landed where it always did, but this time it did not stay. Mom's health is important, she said. So is mine. I'm not responsible for how you both react to choices I didn't make. There was a sharp breath, another muttered insult. Then the call dropped. More messages followed in the days ahead. An uncle she barely remembered called to check in, and then steered the conversation toward business opportunities. A cousin sent long texts about how sharing blessings proved maturity. Maya answered once each, kept her tone even, and refused to defend herself. When entitlement crept in, she ended the conversation. It hurt, but each firm goodbye left her a little less afraid. Meanwhile, her own world reshaped itself in small, solid ways. With emergency funds released from the trust, the eviction vanished. Then, working with Mr. Green, she moved to a modest one-bedroom in a quieter building. The rent was manageable. The walls did not feel like they were listening. Morning light poured through two windows and landed directly on the dresser, which the movers carried exactly where she pointed. She bought a real mattress instead of a thin one on the floor. The changes were careful, deliberate. No designer furniture, no showy car waiting at the curb. She still took the bus, still carried lunch from home, still went to work, while the long-term plan formed with professionals instead of panic. On Elise's list of instructions, tucked behind the trust summary, was the name of a therapist. "You will need someone wise to speak with," the note said. Maya made an appointment. In that room, she started unpacking things that did not fit in any moving box. Years of swallowed anger, the miscarriage she had never mourned, the constant feeling of being the family disappointment. Each session made it easier to believe that she deserved more than survival. She also remembered things she once loved and had abandoned along the way. Sketching returned first. She left a pad and pencil on top of the dresser and drew in the evenings street corners, hands, the curve of a coffee mug, the outline of carved roses in wood. On weekends, she joined a free community class about investing and budgeting, determined not to let Elise's work go to waste through ignorance or fear. Step by step, her days changed texture. Stress did not vanish, but it no longer strangled every breath. She could wake without immediately counting what would go unpaid. She could look at a calendar and see more than shifts and due dates. If you've ever tried to hold your ground with people who only feel close when you're struggling, you know how hard this part is for her. Saying no can feel like betrayal. Protecting your own peace can feel selfish, even when it is simple survival. Yet as Maya hangs up each demanding call and turns back to the quiet glow of her new living room, she is learning that honoring her grandmother's trust also means trusting herself. If that struggle sounds familiar, stay with her story. Somewhere between her boundaries and her new beginning, you might recognize a piece of your own. The waiting period ended quietly, without ceremony or countdown. One morning, an email from Mr. Green arrived with a subject line so plain it almost disappeared between ads and reminders. Final activation. Notice Elise Collins Trust. Maya sat at her kitchen table, the same chipped mug of coffee between her hands, and read the message twice. The trust had matured. All assets were now fully accessible. Her name listed as both beneficiary and active custodian. The weight of that realization didn't come as fireworks. It arrived like sunrise through curtains, slow and steady until it filled the room. She walked to the dresser, still standing near the window, its surface polished but unchanged. Every time she saw it, she felt her grandmother's voice in the quiet. "You'll learn why." Over the following weeks, the zeros became real in ways no lottery could mimic. Account balances updated, documents verified, transactions processed. Mr. Green guided her through the signatures, the codes, the advisories about taxes and planning. She met advisors who spoke in patient tones about risk and diversification. Yet, she knew what Elise would have said: money only grows if hearts do too. So while they discussed portfolios, Maya wrote in a notebook labeled simply Purpose. That purpose became the Elise and Hope Fund, a foundation dedicated to single mothers, students drowning in rent, and families one emergency away from losing their footing. She told the lawyers she didn't want glossy launches or photo ops. She wanted quiet impact, rent paid, books bought, a safety net, woven one, thread at a time. The fund's name carried her grandmother's memory, and the hope came from what Maya had once run out of. She also searched for a place that felt like peace, not wealth, not spectacle. After a long stretch of touring mansions that made her uneasy, she found a 2-story craftsman home at the edge of the city. It had a wraparound porch, trees old enough to shade the roof, and a garden that waited patiently for someone to care for it again. The realtor apologized for the outdated fixtures. Maya smiled and said it was perfect. When the papers were signed and the keys handed over, she moved in with little more than her boxes, the sketchpad, and the same dresser that had carried her through every fall. The movers asked where to place it. She pointed to the center of the living room, where the afternoon light stretched wide. "Here," she said softly. "This is where it belongs." The first night, she slept on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by unpacked boxes. The air smelled of wood and fresh paint. Through the window, crickets hummed, and the world felt unhurried for once. She placed one hand on the dresser's surface before sleeping. For the first time, she wasn't clinging to it out of fear. It stood as a monument to patience, proof that endurance wasn't wasted time. Weeks passed. The fund began its quiet work. Applications came from women she could have stood next to in grocery lines, from students who sounded like younger versions of herself. She met some of them in small coffee shops, signing checks that kept roofs over heads and lights on for another semester. When she thanked them for their courage, many cried. Maya never told them that their strength was what kept her faith in people alive. Then, one gray afternoon, a number she hadn't seen in months appeared on her phone. Dylan landlord's office. For a long minute, she simply stared at it. All reflexes told her to ignore, to protect the calm she had built. But curiosity, and maybe forgiveness, won. She answered. "Miss Collins?" The voice was different, softer, uncertain. "It's Dylan. I heard from someone you moved out a while back. I just wanted to say, look, I didn't know what you were going through. That day, I was awful. My dad got sick. I was running the building alone, and I took it out on tenants, especially you. I shouldn't have." She listened, saying nothing at first. The sound of his voice carried no arrogance now, only the quiet of someone facing his own reflection. "I appreciate that," she said finally. "We all have days we wish we'd handled differently. I saw your story in that community paper," he added. "The fund, helping people pay rent. It's good work. I just wanted to tell you that." For a heartbeat, the memory of him smirking in her doorway flashed behind her eyes, but it didn't sting anymore. "Thank you," she said. "I'm glad you reached out." They talked a few minutes more, not as landlord and tenant, but as two people learning that humility could rewrite endings. When the call ended, Maya looked around her living room, the quiet house, the dresser, glowing in the fading light, and realized she had forgiven him long before he asked. Her days filled with small rhythms, coffee brewing, notes written, grant forms reviewed. She hired a gardener who helped her plant roses by the front walk, the same pattern carved into the dresser's wood. On weekends, she volunteered at a local center, teaching financial literacy to women who reminded her of herself 5 years earlier. Tired, capable, afraid, to hope. Each lesson began with the same words. It takes time, but time is not your enemy if you keep moving. One evening, she returned home to find a package on the porch. Inside was a simple frame, no return address. The photo within showed Elise holding a young Maya in front of the original house, both of them laughing, sunlight spilling through the porch railings. Behind them, just visible, stood the dresser. On the back, a single line in Elise's handwriting. "Some treasures hide, so they can find you when you're ready." Maya placed the photo atop the dresser and stood looking at it until her eyes burned. Everything in that image, the child, the elder, the worn furniture, told the same story. None of them were defined by what they owned. They were defined by how they kept believing when nothing gave them reason to. If you've ever felt invisible while you worked quietly toward a better life, her journey is proof that patience is not weakness. Real worth isn't measured by who notices you, but by who you become when nobody does. Elise's legacy wasn't the money, it was the discipline, the love tucked between struggle and grace. As the evening light spread across the floorboards, Maya whispered a thank you to the air, to every unseen moment that had carried her here. Then she turned off the lamp, letting the dresser stand in the dim glow like a heart that had outlasted every storm. Maybe right now, you're listening with your back against the wall. Only you can see, doing quiet math in your head, the way Maya once did in that tiny apartment. Maybe the numbers are different, the city is different, the faces around you are different, yet the feeling is painfully familiar. You give everything you have, and still it seems like life keeps pushing you toward the door, taping notices on your dreams, counting down hours you never agreed to lose. You just heard how one woman, written off as unlucky, exhausted, and too sentimental, discovered that the only thing everyone mocked was the very place her future had been hidden all along. They laughed at her dresser, called it junk, cursed it as dead weight, blamed it for every disappointment. She carried it anyway. She carried it through evictions, arguments, heartbreaks, and long nights when even breathing felt like hard work. When the last box was already taped and hope had almost left the room, that same battered piece of furniture finally opened and everything changed. But here is the important part. The miracle was not in the wood, the hinges, or the secret compartment. The miracle lived in her decision to keep something that did not shine, did not impress, did not win anyone's approval, simply because it felt true. Her grandmother could have left that fortune to people who chase spotlight and status. Instead, she chose the one person who showed up in the small moments, who helped without cameras, who stayed kind when nobody clapped. What the world called useless, that older woman quietly trusted with 110 million reasons to believe again. So, I want you to look at your own life for a second. Maybe your old dresser is not a piece of furniture at all. Maybe it is a talent you keep shoving into the back of a mental drawer because somebody told you it was stupid, unrealistic, childish. Maybe it is the way you care for people who rarely say thank you. Maybe it is a job that does not look glamorous but keeps food on someone's table. Maybe it is a dream you once whispered and then buried because the first person who heard it laughed. Whatever it is, you know exactly where that object, habit, memory, or calling sits. You see it when you close your eyes. Ask yourself, who convinced you that this quiet thing carried no value? Was it family, who measured worth only in titles and photos? Was it friends who disappeared whenever they could not use your light for themselves? Was it a voice in your own head, repeating the same cruel lines you heard while growing up? The world is very loud when it wants you to drop what makes you different. It will offer all kinds of reasons why you should travel lighter. Be practical. Stop being so emotional. Grow up. Get over it. That is how hidden compartments stay hidden for entire lifetimes. Maya did not become strong the moment she saw bank statements. She became strong all those nights when she chose not to abandon the last piece of someone who had loved her right. She walked upstairs with aching arms and still refused to leave that dresser behind, even when a landlord sneered, even when relatives rolled their eyes. The money only proved what her actions had been saying for years. That stubborn, quiet loyalty is not a flaw, it is a doorway. Her fortune simply stepped through it. Maybe right now, your situation feels nothing like a fairy tale. You might be listening while riding a crowded bus, standing in a kitchen after everyone else has gone to bed, sitting alone in a room that looks too small for your hopes. You might feel late, behind, ignored, certain that whatever chances mattered have already chosen someone richer, louder, prettier, more connected. If any part of that sounds like your heart, I want you to do something very simple when this story ends. Go stand next to your version of that old dresser and just place your hand there. Even if it exists only in your memory, think about the talent you buried, the sacrifice you made that no one saw, the child you raised, the parent you cared for, the promise you kept when it would have been easier to walk away. Think about the notebook under your bed, the song you never finished, the business idea you never researched because failure seemed guaranteed. Those are not scraps. Those are the places your future has been quietly rehearsing, waiting for you to pay attention. Again, hidden value rarely announces itself with fanfare. It waits in the corner, patient, until the night you are finally desperate enough to look closer. If Maya's story reached you, if it stirred even a small ache or a spark inside, do not let that feeling vanish when the video ends. Hold on to it. Let it remind you that dignity can survive poverty, that patience is not the same as passivity, that being underestimated does not mean you are empty. Somewhere in your life, there is at least one old dresser worth defending. Maybe now is the time to dust it off, to press against the same spot everyone else ignored, to see what opens when you refuse to throw yourself away. And if you want more stories that treat your struggle with respect instead of turning it into a joke, stay close to this channel. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next journey. Tap the like button if you felt even a moment of recognition. Share this video with someone who thinks their best years are already gone. Then, down in the comments, write one word for me. Worth. Nothing else. Just that single word. Let it stand as a small promise to yourself that from today on, you will not measure your value by how loudly others approve. Because in the end, Maya's life did not change simply because money arrived. It changed because the truth finally caught up with her. She was never trash on the curb. She was never a burden. She was a vault of quiet strength, walking around in second-hand shoes, carrying a battered dresser the world had already thrown away. So are many of you listening now? Even if no one has told you yet, one day, when your own hidden drawer finally slides open and light pours into the space you thought was empty, I hope you remember this story and realize something powerful. Until that moment comes, keep walking. Even if your steps feel small and shaky, keep showing up for yourself in the ways nobody can post about. Drinking water, answering one more email, opening one more application, choosing not to text the person who only calls when they need saving. These tiny acts look ordinary from the outside, but together they carve out a path strong enough to carry miracles when they finally arrive. Your future self is already waiting at the end, grateful. The treasure was learning to believe you were priceless long before anyone could count it.